The camera flash illuminated the cave's darkness in stark bursts, revealing a scene both macabre and mesmerizing. Dr. Maya Collins adjusted her latex gloves, the sound echoing against the damp stone walls as she leaned closer to the skeleton seated before her. "Position suggests ritualistic placement, not natural death," she murmured into her recorder. "Subject remains in perfect meditation pose, hands bound in prayer formation, with—" She paused, swallowing hard. "What appears to be original hemp rope, partially preserved by the cave's consistent temperature and low humidity." The skeleton sat unnaturally upright against the cave wall, its empty eye sockets staring into eternity. But it was the crown that made Maya's blood run cold, a perfectly preserved circle of blackened briars, each thorn intact, resting atop the yellowed skull like a monarch's diadem. "The crown of thorns shows minimal decomposition despite 37 years of exposure," she continued, her voice betraying a hint of unease. "Preservation is inconsistent with natural processes." Her assistant's camera flashed again, revealing intricate symbols carved into the surrounding cave walls, spirals, thorned vines, and what appeared to be stylized human figures in poses of ecstasy or agony. Markings appear to be ritualistic in nature, possibly corresponding to solstice or equinox positioning. Maya's gloved fingers gently lifted the bound skeletal hands and something clattered to the stone floor. She froze, then slowly reached down to retrieve a small object partially concealed by decades of dust. "Oh my God," she whispered, no longer speaking into her recorder. In her palm lay a small silver locket, its surface tarnished, but the engraving still visible. "To Eleanor, my beloved sister." Maya stared at it, her professional detachment suddenly shattered. Her hand trembled as she clicked open the locket to reveal a faded photograph of a woman with her unmistakable family features. Aunt Eleanor? The Appalachian foothills unfolded beneath Dr. Maya Collins' rental car like rumpled velvet, mist clinging to valleys where sunlight hadn't yet penetrated. Each curve of the narrow mountain road brought Ashford Hollow closer, a place she'd only known through family whispers and academic research. Maya adjusted her rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her tired eyes. At 34, she'd built a respected career in forensic anthropology, but this trip wasn't about professional advancement. The locket found with the skeleton had changed everything. A weathered sign announced her arrival. "Welcome to Ashford Hollow, founded 1843. Population numbers had been scratched out and rewritten so many times, the current figure was illegible. The town materialized slowly. A cluster of faded buildings arranged around a small central square, where time seemed to move at a different pace than the outside world. Maya parked outside the sheriff's office, a squat brick building with American and state flags hanging limp in the still air. As she stepped out, she felt eyes on her from storefront windows and porch swings, the unmistakable scrutiny reserved for outsiders. If you enjoy fictional mysteries like this one, hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Inside, a middle-aged deputy directed her to Sheriff Daniel Finch's office. The man who rose from behind the desk to greet her had the weathered look of someone who carried his father's legacy on his shoulders. "Dr. Collins," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Read about you in the state police report. Forensic anthropologist from the university, right?" "That's right," Maya confirmed. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Sheriff Finch gestured to a chair. "Not every day someone comes asking about our town's darkest chapter. Most folks here prefer to forget." Maya placed the silver locket on his desk. "I can't forget, Sheriff. Not anymore." Finch picked up the locket, examining it with practiced eyes. "This was found with the remains?" "Yes. It belonged to my aunt, Eleanor Collins. She was 22 when she disappeared with the others." Understanding dawned on Finch's face. You're related to one of them. I didn't make the connection. I never met her. She vanished years before I was born, but my father never stopped wondering what happened. He passed away last year, still asking questions. Finch's expression softened. My father was the same way. Harold Finch. He was sheriff when it happened. The case consumed him until the day he died. A heavy silence fell between them, two people connected by their families' unresolved grief. I'd like to see his files, if possible, Maya said finally. Finch hesitated. Those records aren't exactly complete. Dad became obsessed, started seeing connections where maybe there weren't any. It broke him in the end. Please, Maya said quietly. I've spent my career studying death. I need to understand what happened to my aunt. After a long moment, Finch nodded. He stood and unlocked a cabinet behind his desk, pulling out a dusty cardboard box labeled Thorns Path, 1960. Everything we have is in here, he said, setting it before her. Not much to go on after all these years. Maya opened the box, revealing yellowed newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and handwritten notes. The topmost photo showed 11 people standing before a weathered farmhouse, men, women, and 3 children, all dressed in dark clothing. At their center stood a tall man with penetrating eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, Father Silas. There she is, Maya whispered, pointing to a young woman at the edge of the group. Eleanor Collins stared back at her across decades, her expression a mixture of devotion and uncertainty. If you want to know more about the cult itself, Sheriff Finch said, you should talk to Virginia Reed, local historian, been documenting Ashford Hollow's secrets for 40 years. Her family's lived here since the town was founded. Would she speak with me? Virginia loves nothing more than sharing her knowledge, especially with someone from outside who might take her seriously. Town library, 2nd floor, she practically lives there. Maya found the library in a Victorian building at the edge of the town square. Inside, time seemed suspended. Oak shelves, green-shaded reading lamps, and the musty perfume of aging books. A spiral staircase led to the 2nd floor, where a silver-haired woman sat surrounded by stacks of leather-bound volumes. Virginia Reed? Maya asked. The woman looked up, bright eyes magnified behind thick glasses. You must be the anthropologist. News travels fast in Ashford Hollow. She gestured to a chair. Come to ask about our local mystery, I presume. Yes, the congregation of the Thorns Path. Virginia's expression darkened. Nasty business. Some wounds never heal, especially in a place like this. I need to understand what happened to them. My aunt was one of the 11 who vanished. Virginia studied her for a long moment. Which one? Eleanor Collins. Recognition flashed across Virginia's face. The teacher, bright young woman, by all accounts. Such a shame. She reached for a leather-bound journal on a nearby shelf. I've been collecting stories, newspaper clippings, personal accounts, anything related to the congregation. Most folks won't discuss it, but I believe history deserves to be preserved, even the uncomfortable parts. As Virginia opened the journal, a folded paper slipped out. She quickly tucked it away, but not before Maya glimpsed what appeared to be a hand-drawn symbol, a circle of thorns. Sheriff Finch mentioned you've been documenting the town's history for decades. My life's work, Virginia confirmed, though some stories are buried deeper than others. She turned the journal toward Maya. Here's what most people know. Summer of 1960, 11 people calling themselves the congregation of the Thorns Path settle at the abandoned Miller farmstead. Led by Father Silas, they practiced some form of radical Christianity focused on suffering as salvation. Then, during a storm on August 12th, they vanished without a trace. Maya scanned the journal entries, then looked up. But what do you know that most people don't? Virginia smiled thinly. Perceptive. I like that. She closed the journal. There's something I should show you. Not here, though. Too many ears. She reached beneath a stack of papers and withdrew a small leather-bound book, its edges frayed and cover stained. "This belonged to your aunt," Virginia whispered. "I've been keeping it safe all these years." Maya's hands trembled as she accepted the journal. "How did you get this?" "Eleanor gave it to me for safekeeping the day before they vanished. She said, if anything happened to her, someone should know the truth." Maya opened the journal to the first page. In elegant handwriting it read, "The path of thorns leads not to heaven, but somewhere far more terrifying. If I don't return, follow the symbols." The morning light filtered through dusty curtains in Maya's motel room as she pored over Eleanor's journal. Sleep had eluded her, each page revealing more about the woman she'd never known, but whose blood ran in her veins. June 15, 1960. Father Silas spoke today of the world's corruption and the coming purification. His words burn like fire, awakening something in me I didn't know existed. When he wears the crown during ceremonies, his face transforms. The pain seems to elevate him, make him more than human. Am I a fool for believing? Perhaps. But after losing Thomas, what else remains but to seek meaning in suffering? Maya traced her finger over the faded ink. Thomas had been Eleanor's fiancé, killed in a mining accident just months before she joined the cult. Grief had made her vulnerable to Silas's promises of transcendence through pain. Another entry caught her attention. July 10th, 1960. Father says we must surrender everything that binds us to this world. Worldly possessions first, then attachments to people, finally our own physical comfort. The path requires sacrifice. The others gave their jewelry and keepsakes willingly. I hesitated with Mother's locket, but Father Silas said, "My hesitation revealed my weakness. I surrendered it today. The emptiness I feel is unbearable, yet he says this emptiness is where divinity will enter." As Maya flipped through the pages, Eleanor's handwriting grew increasingly erratic, her thoughts more fragmented. The entries described midnight ceremonies, fasting rituals, and strange spiritual experiences that sounded like hallucinations induced by sleep deprivation and malnutrition. A knock at the door startled her. Sheriff Finch stood outside, holding 2 coffees. "Thought you could use this," he said, offering her a cup. "Virginia called, said you two spoke yesterday." "She gave me my aunt's journal," Maya said, inviting him in. "It's disturbing reading." Finch nodded grimly. "I spoke with some of our oldest residents last night. Those willing to talk, anyway. Theo Jackson remembers the cult arriving. Says they came during a thunderstorm like the one they disappeared in. Symbolic, I suppose. What do you think happened to the missing cult members? Share your theories below." Maya showed him a passage from the journal. "Eleanor mentions other townsfolk attending their ceremonies. Did your father's investigation note that?" "No," Finch frowned. "That would have been significant." "Who?" "She doesn't name names, just mentions curious souls from town seeking father's wisdom. One entry suggests someone important, possibly wealthy or influential." Finch sipped his coffee thoughtfully. That might explain why the investigation hit so many dead ends. Dad always felt someone was obstructing him. Later that morning, they drove to the Miller farmstead, now abandoned for nearly 4 decades. The 2-story farmhouse stood like a decaying sentinel, its windows dark, empty sockets, paint peeling like diseased skin. "No one's lived here since they vanished," Finch explained as they approached. "Town council tried selling it in the 70s, but no buyers. People say it's cursed." Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of light that penetrated the gloom through broken windows. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet as they moved through empty rooms, still bearing faint evidence of the cult's presence. Hooks where dark curtains once hung, circular burn marks on wooden floors, and walls stripped of wallpaper where symbols had been painted, now barely visible beneath decades of grime. "They removed most evidence during the original search," Finch said, "but they couldn't erase everything." In what had once been the dining room, Maya knelt to examine markings scratched into the floorboards, intersecting circles and strange angular symbols. These matched the cave markings, she observed. Ritual boundaries, perhaps. As they moved upstairs, Maya felt an inexplicable chill despite the summer heat. In a small bedroom at the end of the hall, a single phrase had been carved into the wall. Through pain, ascension. Eleanor mentions this room in her journal, Maya said quietly. This is where Father Silas would isolate members who questioned his teachings. A floorboard creaked behind them, though neither had moved. Maya turned sharply, but the doorway remained empty. "This place plays tricks on you," Finch muttered, though his hand had moved instinctively to his holster. In the basement, they found more substantial evidence, a stone altar, crude but unmistakable, with deep grooves cut into its surface. "Blood channels," Maya explained, her professional demeanor returning, common in sacrificial altars throughout history, though usually for animals, not humans. "You think they performed human sacrifice?" Finch asked, his voice tight. "The journal doesn't mention it explicitly, but Eleanor writes about the binding, a ritual involving blood and thorns. She seemed terrified of it." As they examined the basement further, Maya's flashlight beam caught something embedded in the dirt floor, a small, tarnished button. She carefully extracted it, revealing an insignia of intertwined thorns. "Part of their ceremonial clothing," she murmured. Later, back at the sheriff's office, Finch pulled out more files from his father's investigation. "Dad never recovered after this case," he admitted, spreading photographs across his desk. "Started seeing connections everywhere, became paranoid. Mom found him sleepwalking, heading for the woods in the middle of the night. Eventually, he resigned, drank himself to an early grave, still muttering about them coming back." "I'm sorry," Maya said softly. Finch handed her a final photograph, the crown of thorns found the morning after the disappearance. "This was the only evidence they left behind, until your skeleton turned up." Maya studied the image. Different from the one on the skeleton, this one's cruder, larger. The one in the cave was more refined, deliberate. As daylight faded outside, Maya returned to Eleanor's journal, finding the entry for August 12, 1960. "The storm approaches. Father says tonight is the night of our transcendence. The binding will free us from earthly suffering. I'm terrified, yet I cannot turn back. The others are preparing the sacred site in the forest. Father wears the crown always now, blood constantly trickling down his face. His eyes have changed. They're hollow, yet somehow full of something ancient. I've hidden this journal as instructed by the voice in my dreams. If anyone finds it, know that we chose this path willingly, though perhaps not understanding where it truly led. The thorns await us all now." Maya closed the journal, a cold weight settling in her stomach. The final entry offered more questions than answers, but one thing was becoming clear. Whatever happened that night in 1960 was no simple disappearance. It was something the town of Ashford Hollow had been hiding for 37 years. The county archives occupied the basement of the courthouse, a sterile room filled with metal shelving and the sharp scent of preservatives. Maya had spent hours reviewing microfiche of local newspapers from 1960, piecing together the town's reaction to the cult's arrival and subsequent disappearance. The Ashford Hollow Gazette, June 3, 1960. "Unusual religious group settles at Miller property." The article described Father Silas as a charismatic speaker with unusual religious views, and noted that the group kept to themselves but welcomed visitors seeking spiritual guidance. A photograph showed Father Silas addressing a small crowd in the town square. Even in the grainy black and white image, his presence was commanding, tall and lean with piercing eyes, wearing a simple black garment. No crown of thorns visible yet, but something about his posture suggested absolute authority. Maya's research revealed that Silas had appeared in several small towns across Appalachia, in the late 1950s, always gathering a small following before moving on. His real name remained unknown, and his past, before emerging as a spiritual leader, was a blank slate. As she scrolled through more articles, a pattern emerged. Initial curiosity about the newcomers gradually shifted to suspicion and fear. By late July, letters to the editor complained about strange noises and unnatural gatherings at the farmstead. Sheriff Finch joined her, bringing coffee and sandwiches. "Find anything useful?" "Maybe. Look at this." Maya pointed to an article from July 25th. Local concerns grow over cult activities. The piece quoted Sheriff Harold Finch. "While we respect religious freedom, reports of midnight gatherings and disturbances have prompted increased patrols near the Miller property. Your father was monitoring them." Daniel nodded. "He mentioned keeping logs of their comings and goings, but those notes weren't in his official files." A photograph accompanying the article showed cult members in town, distinctive in their dark clothing. In the background, partially visible, was a familiar face. "That's Virginia Reed," Maya said, surprised. "Can't be. She'd have been just a child then." "Not Virginia, the woman next to her. Same features, but older." "Could be her mother, Margaret Reed. She was town librarian back then." Maya made a mental note to ask Virginia about this connection. The August 13th newspaper painted a vivid picture of the night the cult vanished. Religious group missing after violent storm. Witnesses described seeing the members walking into the forest during the height of the tempest, carrying torches that somehow remained lit despite the downpour. Sheriff Finch was quoted saying all 11 members were unaccounted for, including 3 children. If you're captivated by mysteries like this one, be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Maya compared these accounts with Eleanor's journal entries, building a timeline of events. The cult had arrived in early June, gradually intensified their practices through July, and vanished in mid-August. Just over 2 months in Ashford Hollow. "I need to see where they disappeared," Maya said. The clearing lay a mile beyond the Miller farmstead, accessible only by a narrow hiking trail that wound through dense forest. Decades of growth had reclaimed the space, but Sheriff Finch knew exactly where to go. "Dad brought me here once," he explained, as they pushed through underbrush. "Only time he ever talked about the case. Said he needed me to know, in case they ever came back." The clearing appeared suddenly, a perfect circle about 30 feet in diameter where trees seemed reluctant to grow. At its center stood a flat stone, roughly the size and height of a table. "The altar," Finch said, "where they found the crown the next morning." Maya approached it cautiously. The stone surface was weathered but still bore faint circular grooves like those in the farmhouse basement. She ran her fingers along the patterns, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. "The symbols on the trees are gone," Finch continued. "Dad said they were carved into the oak trunks, but bark grows over, heals itself. Nature erases human markings eventually." Maya circled the clearing, her trained eye noticing subtle details. The way the ground dipped slightly around the altar, creating natural acoustics. How the trees thinned to the east, offering a view of the night sky. "It's positioned deliberately," she observed. "This wasn't random. They chose this spot for specific reasons. Astronomical alignment, perhaps." Finch looked uncomfortable. "Dad said they would come here at night. Locals reported chanting, strange lights. Some claimed they saw Father Silas wearing that crown, blood streaming down his face, preaching about purification through suffering." As Maya examined the altar more closely, she noticed something nestled in a crack, a small piece of tarnished metal. Carefully, she extracted it with tweezers from her kit. "A sewing needle," she identified, turning it in the sunlight. "Old, but preserved in this crevice." "Significant?" Finch asked. Eleanor's journal mentioned needles used in their rituals. Participants would sew parts of their clothing together while wearing them, a symbol of being bound to the path. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and both looked up to see dark clouds gathering over the mountains. "Storm's coming," Finch observed. "We should head back." As they turned to leave, Maya's foot caught on something buried in the soil. Kneeling, she brushed away decades of accumulated forest debris to reveal a rusted metal ring. "It's a handle," she said, pulling at it. The trapdoor rose with surprising ease, revealing a narrow shaft descending into darkness. Cool, stale air wafted up from below. "A tunnel," Finch breathed, shining his flashlight into the opening. "Dad never mentioned this." "He might not have found it," Maya said, already preparing to descend. "It's been deliberately camouflaged." The tunnel was barely wide enough for an adult to traverse in a crouch. Maya led the way, her flashlight revealing rough-hewn walls supported by old timber bracing. The air grew thicker as they progressed, rich with the scent of damp earth and decay. After about 50 yards, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. Maya's light played across walls, covered in the same symbols found in the cave with the skeleton: spirals, thorn vines, and human figures. "These are fresh," she said, examining the markings. "Not 37 years old, someone's been maintaining them." A sound echoed from deeper in the tunnel system, something between a sigh and a whisper. Both froze, straining to hear. "Just the wind," Finch suggested, though his hand moved to his weapon. Maya's light caught a glint of metal on the ground, a modern padlock broken open. "Someone's been here recently." They continued cautiously, following the main tunnel as it descended deeper beneath the forest. The passage eventually opened into a larger chamber with multiple exits branching in different directions. "It's a network," Maya realized. "These tunnels could lead anywhere: the farmstead, the cave, where we found the skeleton. Or to where the rest of them disappeared to," Finch finished. Before they could explore further, a distant rumble shook dust from the ceiling. The storm had arrived in earnest. The tunnel creaked ominously. "We need to leave," Finch urged. "These old supports won't hold if the ground gets saturated." Reluctantly, Maya agreed. As they retraced their steps, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something in the darkness was following their retreat, patient and ancient. Back on the surface, rain lashed at them as they hurried toward Finch's patrol car. The forest seemed transformed by the storm, trees bending in the wind, shadows dancing between trunks. Eleanor's final journal entry mentioned preparing a sacred site in the forest. Maya shouted over the wind. "This has to be it, not just the clearing, but the tunnel system beneath." Once inside the car, Finch radioed dispatch to report their safe return, then turned to Maya. "We need professional equipment, a team. Those tunnels could be dangerous." "We don't have time," Maya insisted. "If someone's been using those tunnels recently, they'll know we found them. Whatever evidence is down there could disappear." "Evidence of what exactly?" "It's been 37 years." Maya hesitated, then shared her developing theory. "I don't think the cult ended that night. I think they transformed. The modern markings, the maintained tunnels, someone's continuing their practices. And I think Virginia Reed knows more than she's telling us." The rain continued through the night, drumming against the motel windows as Maya spread her findings across the bed. Eleanor's journal, newspaper clippings, photographs from the skeleton discovery, and her own notes formed a constellation of connections she was struggling to interpret. Her phone rang. Dr. Nathan Harper, a colleague specializing in cult psychology, whom she'd consulted about the case. "Maya, I've reviewed everything you sent," his voice crackled through the poor reception. "This congregation of the Thorn Path shows classic cult formation patterns, but with unusual elements. The focus on physical suffering as transcendence isn't unique historically, but Father Silas seems to have combined various traditions into something new and particularly extreme." "What about the crown of thorns?" Maya asked. beyond the obvious Christian symbolism. That's where it gets interesting. In traditional Christianity, the crown represents Christ's suffering. But in this context, it appears to be a symbol of authority, the leader taking on suffering to guide others. However, your aunt's journal suggests the ritual called the binding involved transferring this burden of suffering to someone else. The skeleton we found, it was wearing a crown of thorns, but positioned like a supplicant, not a leader. Exactly, that suggests a power inversion, the leader becoming the sacrifice. It's rare, but not unprecedented in cult dynamics, especially when prophecies fail or leadership is challenged. After hanging up, Maya returned to the journal, focusing on entries about the binding ritual. Eleanor had been increasingly terrified of it, describing preparations that involved fasting, sleep deprivation, and physical mortification. A knock at her door revealed Sheriff Finch, soaked from the rain and looking troubled. "Got the preliminary report on the skeleton," he said, handing her a damp folder. "DNA testing will take time, but physical anthropology suggests a male in his 40s, consistent with Father Silas's estimated age. Cause of death, ... He hesitated. Multiple puncture wounds to the skull, chest, and hands. Not just from the crown. Someone drove thorns or similar objects into the body repeatedly. Maya examined the report. Ritualistic torture. The pattern suggests symbolic placement, mirroring religious iconography of martyrdom. There's more. I found these in the county records. He produced several torn journal pages. They were hidden in an envelope marked Personal H. Finch. My father removed them from the official record. The pages contained interviews with Lillian Archer, the woman mentioned in the background story who had been drawn to the cult but wasn't among the missing. Her testimony described disturbing details about Father Silas's escalating demands. He began requiring blood offerings, Lillian had told Sheriff Harold, first animals, then our own. He said suffering purified the soul, prepared us for transcendence. Some members became concerned when he started focusing on the children, saying they were the purest vessels. Maya looked up from the pages. This suggests the group might have turned against Silas to protect the children. That's what Dad thought too, but he could never prove it. And Lillian Archer left town shortly after giving this statement. No one knew where she went. The following day, they visited Sunny Meadows Nursing Home, where Harold Finch had spent his final years. The facility smelled of antiseptic and canned peaches, its corridors quiet, except for the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. Harold's former roommate, a lucid 90-year-old named Frank Winters, remembered the old sheriff's obsession. Harold never let it go, Frank told them, his gnarled hands folded in his lap. Even with his mind going, he'd have these moments of clarity where he'd talk about those poor souls in the tunnels and how they're still down there, waiting. Did he ever mention specific locations? Maya asked. He had a map, Frank recalled, drew it himself from memory. Said the tunnels connected to old mining shafts, bootlegger routes from Prohibition. The nurses took it away when he started getting agitated, said it was feeding his delusions. As they left the nursing home, Sheriff Finch seemed shaken. I visited Dad here every Sunday for 5 years. He never mentioned tunnels or maps to me. He was protecting you, Maya suggested. Whatever he discovered frightened him enough that he didn't want you involved. Back at the library, they found Virginia Reed cataloging ancient town records. She looked up as they approached, her expression guarded. I understand your mother knew the cult members, Maya said without preamble. She appears in newspaper photographs with them. Virginia removed her glasses slowly. Mother was curious about spiritual matters. She spoke with them occasionally, yes. Did she ever attend their ceremonies? What are you implying, Doctor? Collins? I'm not implying anything. I'm trying to understand why a well-respected librarian would associate with a group the town viewed with suspicion. Virginia's expression hardened. Mother believed in preserving knowledge, even controversial knowledge. She documented their beliefs out of historical interest, nothing more. And you've continued her work. Someone must remember, history forgotten is doomed to repeat itself, Sheriff Finch interjected. Virginia, we found tunnels beneath the forest clearing, recently maintained tunnels. Do you know anything about that? A flicker of something, fear, recognition, crossed Virginia's face before she composed herself. The hills are honeycombed with old passages. Miners, moonshiners, even escaped slaves use them. It's not surprising the cult discovered some. As they left the library, Maya noticed a slip of paper had been tucked into her jacket pocket. Unfolding it, she found a message in neat handwriting. Not everything is in the journal. Some secrets are still walking. Be careful who you trust. That evening, back at her motel, Maya found an unmarked envelope pushed under her door. Inside was a newspaper clipping she hadn't seen before, dated September 1960, a month after the disappearance. The small article noted that Margaret Reed, town librarian, had taken a sudden leave of absence for health reasons, returning 3 months later, fully recovered. Maya called Finch immediately. I think Virginia's mother might have been more involved with the cult than her daughter admits. She disappeared temporarily after the cult vanished. That fits with something else, Finch replied. I checked birth records. Virginia Reed was born in May 1961, 9 months after the cult's disappearance. The implications hung in the air between them. We need to speak with her again, Maya said, finally. But Virginia Reed had vanished from the library. Her home sat empty, neighbors reporting she'd left suddenly that afternoon with a small suitcase, mentioning family business. Instead, they turned their attention to the physical evidence. The state crime lab had completed preliminary analysis of soil samples from the cave and items found with the skeleton. Traces of a hallucinogenic compound were found in the soil surrounding the remains, Maya read from the report. Consistent with some South American shamanic traditions, could explain the reports of visions and transcendent experiences. And the crown, Finch asked? Contains traces of human blood from multiple individuals, at least 8 different DNA profiles. It wasn't just symbolic, it was literally soaked in the blood of followers. As night fell, a knock at Maya's motel room revealed an elderly woman she didn't recognize. The woman glanced nervously over her shoulder before speaking. I'm Martha Keene. I was friends with Lillian Archer before she became involved with them. There's something you should know about Father Silas and that ritual they were planning. Inside, Martha revealed that Lillian had secretly visited her the night before the disappearance, terrified and desperate to confess. She said Father Silas had changed, that something was using him, speaking through him. The binding wasn't what he'd told them initially. It wasn't about binding themselves to divinity through suffering. It was about binding something else, something ancient, to our world through Silas's willing sacrifice. What do you mean, sacrifice? Maya asked. The cult members had learned Silas intended to sacrifice one of the children as part of the ritual. They couldn't allow that. Lillian said they'd made a plan to stop him, to turn the ritual against him instead. Martha's hands trembled as she continued. She came to say goodbye, said if they succeeded, they'd have to go away, hide themselves where Silas's followers in other towns couldn't find them. If they failed, she didn't finish the thought. Did she mention where they might go? Finch pressed. Only that it would be beneath notice. I always thought she meant they'd live simple, anonymous lives. Now I wonder if she meant it more literally. After Martha left, Maya and Finch compared this new information with everything they'd learned. The skeleton in the cave could be Father Silas, Maya theorized. The cult members turned the binding ritual against him, sacrificing him instead of a child. But that leaves 10 people unaccounted for, Finch pointed out. Where did they go? Maya stared at the map they'd constructed of the tunnel system. What if they never left? What if they've been here all along, living beneath the town, continuing some version of their practices? For 37 years? Impossible. Not if they had help from above ground, Maya said quietly. Someone providing supplies, protecting their secret. The realization struck them both simultaneously. Virginia Reed, Finch breathed, and before her, her mother. The storm returned with renewed fury the following evening, lightning splitting the sky as Maya and Sheriff Finch raced toward the Miller farmstead. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, visibility reduced to mere feet ahead. "Just like the night they vanished," Finch murmured. "Same date, same weather." They'd spent the day gathering evidence, connecting Virginia Reed to suspicious deliveries of supplies to the forest area over decades. Records showed her mother had purchased the Miller property through a shell company in 1961, officially for historical preservation. No development had been permitted since. "We should wait for backup," Finch said as they parked near the dilapidated farmhouse. "There's no time," Maya insisted. "If Virginia realizes we've figured it out, she'll destroy evidence. She's protected this secret her entire life." The farmhouse loomed before them, dark and forbidding in the storm. They approached cautiously, flashlights cutting through sheets of rain. The front door hung open, swinging in the wind. Inside, the floor of the main room had been cleared, the accumulated dust swept away to reveal a circular pattern inlaid in the wooden planks. Concentric rings of thorned vines surrounding a central star. Candles burned at strategic points around the circle, their flames somehow undisturbed by the drafts that whipped through broken windows. "Someone's been here recently," Finch whispered, drawing his weapon. A creak from the basement door drew their attention. Maya's flashlight beam caught movement on the stairs, a figure in dark clothing retreating downward. "Virginia," Maya called, "we just want to talk." No response came except the continued sound of footsteps descending. They followed cautiously, the basement darker and danker than during their previous visit. The stone altar now held fresh candles and a small bowl containing a dark liquid. Blood, Maya identified, her scientific mind engaging despite the circumstances. Recent. The wall behind the altar had been opened, revealing a passage that hadn't been visible before. Cool air flowed from the opening, along with the distant sound of chanting. If this story has kept you entertained, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more mysteries. The tunnel beyond was different from those they'd explored earlier, newer, with electric lights strung along the ceiling at intervals. They moved silently, the chanting growing louder as they progressed. After several minutes of walking, the tunnel widened into a large circular chamber. Maya stopped abruptly, Finch nearly colliding with her. Before them, Virginia Reed stood at the center of a group of robed figures, their faces hidden beneath hoods. The chanting ceased as the group became aware of the intruders. "You shouldn't have come," Virginia said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "This isn't for outsiders to witness." "Virginia Reed," Finch announced, "we need to ask you some questions about the congregation of the Thorned Path." Virginia smiled thinly. "You're standing in it, Sheriff. We never left. We simply went where no one would look for us." The robed figures remained still, their faces shadowed. Maya counted 9 in total, plus Virginia. "You're not old enough to be one of the original members," Maya said. "No, but my mother was. Margaret Reed joined them willingly, drawn to Father Silas's vision. But when he changed, when his teachings turned dark, they knew they had to act." Virginia gestured, and the figures lowered their hoods, revealing men and women of varying ages, some in their 60s, others clearly younger, perhaps even born underground. "The children from 1960, Maya asked, her heart racing. "Some," Virginia confirmed, "others are second generation, children born in the tunnels, raised in our ways." "And Father Silas?" Finch pressed, his hand still on his holstered weapon. Virginia's expression hardened. "Father Silas betrayed us. He promised transcendence through willing sacrifice, but his sacrifice was to be unwilling, one of the children. The congregation couldn't allow that. So they turned his ritual against him," Maya concluded. "The binding. Yes, they bound him with his own crown, sealed him in the cave with his own ritual. My mother helped them disappear into the tunnel system, which was far more extensive than anyone knew. Old coal mines, prohibition hideaways, Civil War escape routes, all connected beneath the forest." "And the 10 survivors have been living down here ever since?" Finch asked incredulously. "Not all 10. Some left over the years, established new lives elsewhere. Some died. But the core remained, keeping the true teaching alive. Not Silas's corrupted version, but the original path of willing sacrifice and mutual support." Maya stepped forward. "My Aunt Eleanor Collins, is she still alive?" A figure separated from the group, pushing back her hood to reveal an elderly woman with Maya's same distinctive eyes. Though aged by decades of underground living, her face held the same thoughtful expression from the old photographs. "Hello, Maya," Eleanor said softly. "You have your father's determination." Maya fought back tears. "All these years, Dad never stopped looking for you. I couldn't return. None of us could. We made a choice that night, and there was no going back." "What choice?" Finch demanded. "What really happened?" Virginia interceded. Silas had connected with something ancient, something dark. The tunnels weren't just hideaways, they were built over old ritual sites. Indigenous people avoided these woods for centuries because of what they sensed dwelling beneath. Silas found a way to communicate with it, to channel its power through suffering. "That's why he wore the crown," Eleanor added. "It opened him to its influence, but it consumed him, changed him. By August, he wasn't Silas anymore, just a vessel for something else." "The binding was meant to trap it," Virginia continued. "When they realized what was happening, the congregation modified the ritual. Instead of binding the entity to our world through a child sacrifice, they bound it to Silas and sealed him away." Maya struggled to process these claims. "You're saying they performed some kind of exorcism?" "Call it what you will," Virginia replied. "It worked, but at a price. They could never leave the tunnels completely. Someone always had to maintain the seals, perform the rituals that kept the binding intact. Until the hikers found the cave," Finch realized, "they broke the seal." A tremor ran through the chamber, dust raining from the ceiling. The storm above was intensifying. "Yes," Virginia confirmed, "and now it's awakening again. We need to renew the binding tonight during the storm, just as it was done 37 years ago." Maya looked to her aunt. "Is this real, Eleanor? Or is this decades of isolation and cultish thinking?" Eleanor met her gaze steadily. "I understand your skepticism. I was a science teacher before joining the congregation. But I've seen things in these tunnels that defy rational explanation. Whatever you choose to believe about what dwells here, understand that Silas was real, his madness was real, and the danger he posed to those children was real." "Why bring me into this?" Maya asked. "Why now?" "Because the binding is weakening," Virginia said urgently. "We need new blood, someone of Eleanor's bloodline. That's you, Maya." Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger this time. Small stones fell from the ceiling. "We don't have much time," Virginia warned. "The storm is reaching its peak." Suddenly, the electric lights flickered and died, plunging the chamber into darkness except for the ritual candles. In that moment, Maya felt something change in the air. A pressure, a presence. Virginia lunged forward, grabbing Maya's arm with surprising strength. "You must help us complete the circle." Finch drew his weapon. "Let her go, Virginia." "You don't understand," Virginia hissed. "If the binding fails, it won't just be us at risk. It will spread, consume, just as it nearly did through Silas." Maya felt torn between disbelief and the undeniable reality of her aunt standing before her after 37 years. "What would I have to do? Maya, you can't seriously—" Finch began. "Just tell me," Maya interrupted. Virginia's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Wear the crown, complete the circle, accept the pain that seals the barrier." "No," Eleanor said suddenly, stepping between them. "Not my niece, I'll do it. It should be me." "You're too old," Virginia argued. "The ritual requires strength." "Then I'll do it," Finch offered unexpectedly. "My father gave his sanity trying to solve this mystery. If there's any truth to what you're saying, I owe it to him to finish what he started." Another violent tremor rocked the chamber. A large section of ceiling collapsed at the far end, blocking one of the tunnel exits. Panic erupted among the robed figures. "It's coming!" someone shouted. "The barrier's failing!" Through the dust and confusion, Maya saw Virginia retrieve something from an alcove, a crown of thorns, newly fashioned, its barbs gleaming wickedly in the candlelight. "There's no time to argue," Virginia insisted. "Someone must wear it now." In the chaos, Maya failed to see Virginia's subtle movement. A small vial emptied into the ritual bowl, its contents mixing with the blood already there. But Finch noticed. "Maya, wait," he called. "She's drugging the mixture." Virginia turned on him with unexpected ferocity, producing a knife from her robes. "You'll ruin everything," she snarled, lunging at him. Finch sidestepped, but the unstable ground betrayed him. He stumbled, and Virginia's blade found his shoulder. He cried out, dropping his weapon. Maya rushed to his aid, but Eleanor intercepted Virginia, grappling with her for control of the knife. "Enough!" Eleanor shouted. "This isn't our way." "It's the only way," Virginia screamed back. "The binding requires blood freely given in pain. Her blood. The bloodline must continue the seal." As they struggled, Virginia's foot caught on a ritual candle, sending it tumbling into the bowl of blood. Flames erupted instantly, spreading to nearby tapestries and wooden supports. "Fire!" Maya shouted. "We need to get out." The chamber was quickly filling with smoke. The cult members scattered, heading for various tunnel exits. Eleanor released Virginia, who scrambled away into a side passage. Maya helped Finch to his feet. "Can you walk?" "It's just a flesh wound," he grimaced. "Go after your aunt." Eleanor was already moving toward the main tunnel. "This way!" "We can reach the surface through the old root cellar." They ran through smoke-filled passages, the fire spreading behind them with unnatural speed. Maya could hear Virginia's voice echoing from somewhere in the labyrinth, chanting in a language she didn't recognize. The tunnel began to slope upward. Ahead, Eleanor pushed against what appeared to be a solid wall, revealing a hidden door. Cool night air rushed in, heavy with rain. They emerged into the storm, behind the Miller farmstead. Lightning illuminated the scene in strobes, rain lashing their faces. In the distance, sirens wailed, the fire department responding to the smoke now pouring from the ground. "Your backup?" Maya asked Finch, who nodded. "Sent a coded message before we entered, just in case." Eleanor stood in the rain, face upturned, eyes closed. 37 years, she whispered. "I'd almost forgotten what rain feels like." A scream cut through the storm. Virginia, emerging from another tunnel entrance, her robes ablaze despite the downpour. She carried the crown of thorns above her head like an offering, her eyes wild and unfocused. "The binding must be completed," she shrieked, staggering toward them. "The circle must be unbroken." Before they could react, she collapsed to her knees, the burning crown falling from her grasp. The fire consuming her robe seemed to burn with unnatural intensity, heedless of the rain. "Help her," Maya cried, moving forward, but Eleanor held her back. "It's too late," she said softly. She made her choice. As Virginia fell forward onto the muddy ground, the crown of thorns landed beside her, its barbs gleaming in the lightning flashes, before the flames finally succumbed to the rain. 1 week later, Maya stood at the entrance to the cave where it all began. Yellow police tape cordoned off the area, but she ducked under it, her academic credentials granting her continued access to the site. The forensic investigation had confirmed what they'd already suspected. The skeleton belonged to Father Silas. DNA extracted from the bones matched samples from items preserved in the cult's living quarters. The crown of thorns he wore contained traces of a powerful hallucinogenic compound, explaining his visions and increasingly erratic behavior described in Eleanor's journal. Virginia Reed had not survived her burns. Her body, identified through dental records, revealed something unexpected: an intricate pattern of scar tissue across her back and shoulders, identical to markings described in Eleanor's journal as part of the cult's initiation rituals. Virginia hadn't just been preserving the cult's history. She had been an active participant, possibly initiated by her mother decades ago. The tunnel system had partially collapsed after the fire, but authorities had recovered evidence confirming the cult members had indeed lived beneath Ashford Hollow for years. The network was far more extensive than anyone had imagined, with passages leading to concealed exits miles from town. Maya entered the cave slowly, her flashlight illuminating the spot where the skeleton had been found. The forensic team had removed it weeks ago, but she could still picture it perfectly, seated in meditation, crowned in thorns, hands bound in eternal prayer. Eleanor had agreed to give a formal statement about the events of August 12, 1960. Her account, while carefully omitting supernatural elements, confirmed that the cult members had turned against Father Silas when he began targeting children for increasingly dangerous rituals. They had performed a modified version of the binding on him instead, a ritual involving isolation, sensory deprivation, and eventually death. The 10 survivors had hidden in the tunnel system with Margaret Reed's assistance, gradually establishing a hidden community. Some eventually left, assuming new identities in distant places. Others, like Eleanor, remained below, maintaining their vigil over Silas's remains and the rituals they believed kept some ancient evil contained. Scientists and law enforcement dismissed the supernatural aspects of their claims, attributing them to decades of isolation, cult conditioning, and the documented use of hallucinogenic substances in their rituals. The tunnels were being systematically sealed with concrete, the Miller farmstead scheduled for demolition. Maya had helped Eleanor relocate to a small apartment in town. Her aunt was adjusting slowly to life above ground, marveling at technological advances and reconnecting with the world she'd left behind. DNA tests had confirmed their relation, and Maya had called her father's siblings, who were still processing the miraculous return of their long-lost sister. Sheriff Finch approached, his shoulder bandaged beneath his uniform. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, joining her at the cave entrance. "Just saying goodbye," Maya replied. "I'm heading back to the university tomorrow." The state police are satisfied with our report. The official finding is that the cult members died in a cave-in back in 1960, with only Silas's remains discovered. Eleanor and the others will be left alone. No charges for living off the grid all these years. And the children who were born in the tunnels? Being processed through social services, given new identities. Most are adapting well, considering. They stood in silence for a moment, both aware of everything their report had omitted. Virginia's ravings about ancient entities, the unnatural behavior of the fire, the inexplicable preservation of the crown of thorns for nearly 4 decades. "Do you think there was something to it?" Finch asked finally. "All that talk about binding something dark, something that used Silas as a vessel?" Maya considered carefully before answering. "I think people who isolate themselves and practice extreme rituals for decades develop shared psychoses. I think Virginia truly believed what she was doing was necessary, just as Father Silas believed in his divine mission. That's the rational explanation." "I'm a scientist, Daniel. Rational explanations are what I do." Yet, as she spoke, Maya fingered the small object in her pocket, the locket that had been found with Silas's remains. Inside, alongside the photograph of Eleanor, they had discovered a tiny scrap of paper with a single sentence written in faded ink. "The thorns grow when fed with faith." The locket had been analyzed thoroughly, with no unusual compounds or mechanisms found. Yet Maya couldn't explain why, when left alone overnight in her motel room, the tarnish had disappeared completely, leaving the silver gleaming as if newly polished. "You're heading back to civilization tomorrow," Finch said. "What will you tell people about Ashford Hollow?" The truth, that a cult disappeared here in 1960, and some members survived in hiding for decades. That Father Silas died during a ritual gone wrong, and his followers preserved his remains as part of their belief system. "And the rest?" Maya smiled faintly. "Some mysteries are better left unsolved." As they turned to leave, Maya's flashlight caught something on the cave floor, a small, freshly cut briar twig with thorns intact. It hadn't been there moments before. She left it undisturbed, following Finch out into the sunlight without comment. Behind them, the cave entrance stood dark and silent, its secrets once again sealed within. Later that evening, Maya visited Eleanor one last time. Her aunt was sitting by the window of her new apartment, watching the sunset with wonder. "I never thought I'd see this again," Eleanor said as Maya entered. "Simple things. Sunset, birds, children playing. They become precious when you've lived in darkness." Maya sat across from her. "The authorities are satisfied with the story. No one will bother you now." "And Virginia? What will happen to her remains?" "Cremated as requested in her will. No one else will wear the crown." Eleanor nodded slowly. She believed so completely, even more than the rest of us, perhaps because her mother raised her in the faith from birth. "Was any of it real?" Maya asked softly. "The entity, the binding? Or was it all just Silas's madness and manipulation?" Eleanor's eyes, so like Maya's own, held decades of secrets. "Does it matter?" "Real or not, belief has power." The congregation believed so strongly that they were willing to live underground for 37 years. Virginia believed so completely that she died rather than risk the binding failing. "And what do you believe now?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "I believe humans create their own monsters and their own salvation. I believe Silas found something dark within himself and gave it a name, a purpose. And I believe that what bound him wasn't thorns or rituals, but the collective will of people determined to protect the innocent." She reached for Maya's hand. "Take the journal. Keep it safe. Some will call it superstition, others will see a psychological case study. But it's also a warning about the power of charisma, about how easily people can be led to mistake suffering for salvation." The next morning, as Maya packed her car for the journey home, she made one final stop at the cave. The police tape had been removed, and a construction crew was preparing to seal the entrance permanently with concrete. When no one was looking, she slipped inside one last time, her flashlight revealing the empty space where the skeleton had sat for decades. Something compelled her to reach into her pocket, where she had placed the small silver locket. She set it gently in the exact spot where Silas's remains had been found. "An ending," she whispered to the darkness, "for Eleanor, for all of them." As she turned to leave, a cool breeze brushed her cheek. Impossible, this deep in the cave with no other entrance. For just a moment, she thought she heard a whisper, like the rustling of dry briars. Outside, Maya squinted in the bright sunlight, breathing deeply of the fresh mountain air. The town of Ashford Hollow spread below her, its secrets now part of her own story. Whatever truth lay beneath its surface, psychological manipulation or something more primal and unexplainable, it had shaped the lives of everyone involved, rippling outward through generations. She started her car and began the long drive home, leaving behind the mystery of the congregation of the Thorned Path. In her rearview mirror, Ashford Hollow receded into the distance, the hills embracing it like protective arms around a dangerous secret. Some mysteries reveal their answers gradually, over decades of patient investigation. Others remain perpetually just beyond our grasp, challenging our understanding of reality itself. For Maya Collins, the truth lay somewhere in between, in a small silver locket, a crown of thorns, and the unbreakable bonds of faith, fear, and family that transcend even death itself. As she crossed the county line, Maya didn't notice the small briar twig that had somehow appeared on her back seat, its thorns gleaming in the afternoon sun.